God, those are my child's footsteps," Evelyn Marlow whispered. Her eyes froze as she watched a group of teenagers perform a step dance at the Texas County Fair. Each stomp echoed like a hammer, striking the heart of a mother shattered 30 years ago. Her triplet sons Lucas, Noah, and Gabriel vanished from the Black community neighborhood in the summer of 1981, leaving no trace. The police closed the case as an unsolved mystery. Evelyn never stopped searching for a single day. And now, amid the pounding drums and roaring cheers, she saw a familiar figure. The shoulders, the smile, the rhythm of movement identical to Gabriel's as a child. Was this merely the delusion of a desperate mother, or a sign of a truth buried for 3 decades? The Texas sun stretched across the small neighborhood. Red brick houses stood in neat rows, and classic soul music poured from a speaker in the Johnsons' backyard. Today, the community gathered to celebrate little Marcus's 8th birthday. The savory smoke of barbecue drifted, blending with the adults' laughter and the children's boisterous cheers. It was the kind of festivity the African-American community in the area had upheld for generations, a tight-knit bond, like a safety net, embracing every member. Amid the crowd, Evelyn Marlow stood quietly under the shade of an old oak tree. Past 60, her dark brown skin bore the marks of time, but her eyes remained bright, always scanning the faces of children. Every smile, every running step, pierced her heart. 30 years had passed since Lucas, Noah, and Gabriel vanished from this neighborhood, but their memory never left her. Walter, her husband, stood at the yard's edge, chatting with some men about the local football team. He still carried a sturdy presence. But Evelyn knew deep down he, too, had never eased the pain of losing their sons. Children gathered around a long table covered with a white cloth, scrambling for slices of chocolate cake. Evelyn forced a faint smile, trying to blend into the shared joy. But then, as a door swung open on the porch, she froze. A black man entered, leading a boy of about 8. "Sorry, we're late," he said. His voice was low, weary. The boy slipped from his father's hand, darting toward the laughing children. Evelyn stood paralyzed. The green plaid overalls with bright yellow straps, thick curly hair, sun-kissed skin, it was like a blade twisting into her heart. That was the last image she remembered of her sons. The morning they disappeared, Lucas had insisted on those overalls. Gabriel wore his backward all morning, and it took her 10 minutes to convince him to fix it. The scene flashed vividly, and now it came alive before her, in the form of a stranger's child. Without thinking, Evelyn rushed toward the boy. Her heart pounded as if it would burst from her chest. Her trembling hand touched his shoulder, turning him around. His wide eyes met hers, startled. For a fleeting moment, Evelyn saw Gabriel's eyes bright, innocent, and full of fear. The boy yanked away, running to his father, crying out. The man turned, eyes wary, pulling his son close. Some guests began to notice. Evelyn stood rooted, hands shaking, lips moving but unable to speak. Walter reached his wife's side, his arm protective. He glanced at the overalls, his eyes briefly flashing with shock, but he quickly regained composure. He explained to the man that his wife had suffered a terrible loss, that this coincidence overwhelmed her. The man nodded, sympathetic, then led his son away. The party's mood dampened. Neighbors whispered, casting pitying glances at Evelyn. Mrs. Johnson, the host, approached, gently taking Evelyn's hand, reminding her that the community never forgot that tragedy, that everyone understood the pain she carried. But Evelyn heard nothing but her own heartbeat. Walter guided his wife from the yard, away from the laughter, music, and rich barbecue scent. They walked the familiar street, the street where their sons once played, where 3 small bicycles once leaned against the fence. Evelyn felt pulled back to 1981, that sweltering afternoon when Mama echoed, then faded forever. Back at their small house, Evelyn sat silently on the sofa, clutching her chest, tears streaming. Walter brought tea, trying to comfort her. But she knew today's event wasn't just a fleeting emotion. It was a reminder, a bell, a sign. Those overalls couldn't be mere coincidence. The past was calling her, forcing her to look back, to dig deeper, to confront it. And she knew, if she didn't follow this lead, the obsession would never let her go. Outside, the Texas sun sank, leaving an orange-red streak across the sky. In the gathering darkness, Evelyn closed her eyes tightly, taking a deep breath. She would reopen the memory box in the attic. She had to find the truth. Dear audience, please pause a moment to subscribe to the channel before continuing with the main story, but only if you truly connect with what I'm sharing here. Leave a comment below to let me know where you're watching from and what time it is. It's fascinating to see people from all over joining us. The small house rested quietly in the Texas twilight. The last rays of sunlight slipped through the curtains, casting faint, golden streaks on the walls. Evelyn sat upright on the sofa, her back rigid, as if her entire body awaited something about to stir. Walter entered the living room, carrying a folding ladder, his eyes hesitant but resolute. Their attic hadn't been opened in nearly 2 decades. Up there, memories were sealed, as if letting them gather dust would dull the pain. But Evelyn knew today was different. The images from the party, the green overalls, the thick black curls, all refused to let her turn away again. Walter pushed open the attic door. The smell of old wood and musty dust wafted down, carrying the breath of the past. He climbed slowly, the floorboards creaking underfoot. Minutes later, he returned, holding a large cardboard box, its edges worn and covered in thick dust. Evelyn stared at it, as if it were a portal back to 1981. They set the box on the coffee table. Walter wiped the dust with a cloth, each movement careful, as if afraid to break something fragile. When the lid opened, a musty scent rose, mingling with the smell of old paper and worn fabric, the kind only time could create. Inside were packed memories, 3 identical teddy bears, a pair of small baseball gloves, a few labeled school notebooks. Evelyn lifted each item, hands trembling, eyes brimming with tears. Each piece whispered a story, an afternoon practicing baseball in the yard, nights clutching teddy bears, mornings rushing to finish homework before school. At the bottom, Walter found a brown leather-bound album. He placed it on his lap, silent for a moment as if gathering courage. Evelyn sat close, her hand resting on his. Then he opened the first page. Early life photos appeared. 3 infants wrapped in white blankets, eyes wide with wonder. Then came scenes of first steps, birthdays, a beach picnic. Each photo was a fragment of lost happiness. Evelyn's fingers brushed each small face, as if fearing they'd vanish. Page after page, until they stopped. A familiar photo emerged. 3 triplet boys standing on the porch, arms around each other, radiant smiles. All wore green plaid overalls, yellow straps bright against white shirts. The early Texas sun lit their faces, their childhood eyes gleaming. Evelyn choked. This was the last morning. The photo was taken an hour before they left the house and vanished forever. Walter leaned in, his eyes shifting from his son's faces to the background. Then he froze. At the frame's edge, half a car appeared, a deep red Cadillac, its glossy paint shining in the sunlight. Walter recognized it instantly. So did Evelyn. Both gasped, as if discovering a crack in the seemingly solid wall of memory. It was the car Lucas adored. The 6-year-old could stand for hours, mesmerized by its sleek curves and chrome rims. And that car belonged to Howard, Fielding, the white elementary school teacher, once revered by the community, who taught them ABCs, took them on field trips, and earned parents' trust. Evelyn recalled Howard leaving town a week before her sons disappeared. The neighborhood had thrown him a farewell party at the Baptist church hall, where the choirs sang, and people cried over losing a devoted teacher. Yet here, in this photo, his Cadillac appeared on the morning of the tragedy. Evelyn shakily flipped the photo, hoping for a note. Nothing but a faded Kodak stamp. The processing date clear, 2 days after her sons vanished. Undeniable. A chill crawled down her spine. Everything Evelyn believed that Howard had left, that he was uninvolved, now grew murky. Walter tried to reassure her, suggesting it might be a coincidence, perhaps someone else's car. But Evelyn knew, in that neighborhood, no one else owned such a Cadillac. She knew every family, every vehicle. No mistake. She sat silently, clutching the photo, as if holding the only thread to the truth. In her mind, scattered pieces began to connect. The overalls at the party, the Cadillac photo, memories of Howard. On the old fireplace clock, the minute hand moved slowly, each tick urging her forward. Evelyn felt time running out. She had to find answers. And she knew the clue lay with Howard fielding the man who seemed to have vanished from their lives. Dear audience, if you're watching and finding this story captivating, please comment with the number 1 or "I'm still here" to keep listening. Night fell. The neighborhood glowed under dim yellow streetlights. Evelyn sat alone in the living room, the photo with the deep red Cadillac before her. The room was quiet, save for the clock's ticking. Walter had fallen asleep on the sofa, but she couldn't. The image haunted her, suffocating. Howard Fielding. The name surged in her mind like an old scar, torn open. He was the most beloved teacher at the elementary school, one of the few white educators devoted to the black community in this town. He sang gospels, played piano for the choir on special occasions. He smiled often, gave candy to kids. Then he vanished, leaving a void everyone mourned. They said he moved to another town to teach, but now, the Cadillac in the photo contradicted everything. If he had truly left, why was his car parked outside their house that fateful morning? Evelyn couldn't let the question fade into silence. She stood, entering the small study off the house. On an old bookshelf, she found a tattered phone book, its pages yellowed. Her trembling fingers flipped through, stopping at a familiar name, Louise Mitchell. Louise, a former colleague in the Baptist choir, also served on the school board. If anyone knew Howard's history, it was her. Evelyn picked up the phone, hesitating briefly. Nearly 3 decades had passed since they spoke. Was it too late to reconnect? But the urge within overpowered doubt. She dialed. A frail but warm voice answered. They chatted for a few minutes about health, family, old choir friends now scattered. But Evelyn couldn't hold back. She blurted out Howard's name. A sudden silence fell. Louise sighed, as if the name stirred unspoken memories. Then she spoke, slowly but firmly. Howard never applied to transfer to any district or state. After leaving Oak Ridge, he vanished from the education system. Rumors spread that he bought remote land in Texas and started a charity farm for immigrant children. Evelyn held her breath. Each word tore through the fog of 30 years, a farm for children. So he didn't quit teaching, but shifted to another form. A secluded place, far from the community's eyes, where he had full control over children. Louise tried to recall the name. After a moment, she whispered, Howard's Haven for Hope, a farm he pitched as a sanctuary for homeless children, mostly of Mexican or Central American descent. Its website was sparse, with little information, just a few photos of young men smiling in the sun, holding farming tools. Evelyn shivered. Those young faces, could they be Lucas, Noah, Gabriel? Had her sons grown up under different names, in a fabricated story? She thanked Louise, hung up, but her hand still gripped the phone. In her mind, 2 images overlapped, the 1981 Polaroid with the Cadillac and the website banner with young men's smiles. A night breeze slipped through the window, carrying the damp scent of earth after rain. Evelyn felt both trembling and awakened. If Howard truly vanished that year to start a farm, if he took children there, everything she believed for 30 years was a staged lie. She returned to the living room. Walter slept, breathing evenly, hand resting loosely on the chair. Evelyn sat beside him, placing the Cadillac photo on the table, next to a paper scribbled with the name, Howard's Haven for Hope. She knew she had to go. The truth no longer lay in vague memories but out there, where the farm hid among Texas grasslands. And she would go, no matter what she had to face. That night, Evelyn didn't sleep. She sat in the dim room, staring at the old keepsakes. She waited for dawn, for the first light to begin a new journey, one that might reunite her with her sons or drown her in a truth more painful than loss. The next morning, the Texas sky was veiled in thin gray clouds, the sunlight softer than usual. Evelyn sat in the passenger seat of Walter's old sedan, clutching the Cadillac photo. She hadn't slept, waiting only for this moment, heading toward the place that might hold the truth she'd sought for 30 years. Walter drove slowly through suburban roads, then onto the highway, where endless grasslands stretched on both sides. The deeper they went, the emptier the landscape became. Rare billboards vanished, replaced by sparse farms and weathered barns. Evelyn stared out the window, her heart racing each time she thought of Howard's haven for hope. In her mind, it wasn't just a charity farm but a secret concealed behind a mask of kindness. After nearly 2 hours, they turned onto a narrow gravel road. A weathered wooden sign stood by the path, its peeling white paint still bearing the faint words, "Howard's Haven for Hope." Walter slowed, the car bouncing on the rough road, leading to a wide plot. Before them appeared a simple compound, a large wooden house at the center, a few small dormitories, a barn, and fields stretching behind. The air was strangely peaceful, with only a few young men of Mexican and black descent working the fields, their laughter and hammer strikes mingling with rooster crows. As they stepped from the car, the young man approached. In his mid-20s, with dark skin and thick curly hair, his smile shone brightly. He wore a faded t-shirt and dusty jeans, but his eyes sparkled with life. Evelyn froze. Something in that smile made her heart skip. The wide grin, revealing even white teeth, eyes narrowing at the corners when he laughed, just like Lucas as a child. For a moment, she felt she was seeing her son, not a stranger. The young man introduced himself as Ferdinand, a coordinator at the farm. He warmly invited them to tour, as Howard and most staff were at a county agricultural event. Walter agreed. Evelyn followed silently, hiding her trembling hands beneath her coat. Ferdinand led them through the livestock pens, vegetable gardens, and a row of white buildings with walls covered in children's drawings. Smiling suns, flowers, birds. He explained this was the activity area where children learned and played. His voice brimmed with pride, eyes gleaming as he spoke of the work. Inside a large room, Evelyn saw low tables covered with paper, paints, and crafts. The main wall was plastered with children's art, houses with red roofs, golden fields, naive portraits. But in the center, one painting stood out. It was a crayon drawing of a red Cadillac, detailed to an eerie degree. Every curve, chrome trim, and glossy wheel was vivid. Even the license plate was faintly sketched. Evelyn held her breath, eyes locked on the painting. Ferdinand smiled, pointing to it. He said he drew it himself, as an example for the kids. He spoke proudly, saying the car was one of Howard's favorites, sometimes driven around the farm. Evelyn's blood ran cold, her body tensed, heart pounding. A memory surged. That 1981 morning, Lucas tugging her hand, pointing at the gleaming red Cadillac, his eyes bright with excitement. Now, 30 years later, that memory lived again in Ferdinand's painting. She looked at Ferdinand again, curly hair, high cheekbones, sturdy build. His every movement echoed her son Lucas, the eldest triplet. Walter gently touched her back, a reminder to stay calm. Evelyn bit her lip, forcing silence. But inside, a scream echoed. This couldn't be coincidence. They continued the tour, Ferdinand cheerfully explaining, unaware of Evelyn's turmoil. As they returned to the front yard, Evelyn glanced back at the Cadillac painting. It hung quietly on the white wall, a reminder that the past never vanished, only waited to be unveiled. Leaving the farm, Evelyn sat silently in the car, hands clutching the old photo in her pocket. Outside, the grasslands stretched endlessly, but to her, the path had narrowed to one, straight toward the truth. The Texas noon blazed with golden sunlight. The wide field became a sea of people. The county fair, the year's most anticipated event, drew communities from nearby towns. Music blasted from speakers, The smell of roasted corn and fried chicken filled the air, mixed with cheers from the game area. White tents stretched like a makeshift city, where farmers displayed livestock, organizations fundraised, and noisy stalls sold pastries and cotton candy. Evelyn and Walter blended into the crowd, but her heart was heavy. Ferdinand's image lingered, his smile suffocating her. Now, every step brought her closer to the man behind it all, Howard Fielding. In the fairground center, under a blue and white banner, stood a booth with bold letters, Howard's Haven for Hope. Young men in matching t-shirts handed out flyers, promoting a program helping immigrant children learn and farm. The booth looked like any charity, bright colors, photos of smiling kids everywhere. But to Evelyn, it was a mask. She stopped, heart racing. Inside the tent, a white-haired man spoke with a couple, potential donors. Tall and robust despite his 60s, his gestures were confident, eyes charismatic. Evelyn recognized him instantly. Howard Fielding, the former teacher, a symbol of kindness and past memories, stood just steps away. Walter touched her shoulder. They waited until the couple left. They approached. Howard turned, a polite smile on his lips. But when his eyes met Evelyn's, a strange flicker passed, like recognition quickly hidden. Evelyn felt it clearly, though it lasted a split second. They exchanged polite greetings. Howard listened as Evelyn mentioned the past, his time as a teacher in Oak Ridge. At first, he smiled, nodded, saying his memory had faded, that many faces blurred over time. But when Evelyn mentioned the Marlow triplets, his eyes briefly faltered. He hid it quickly, but Evelyn caught the flash of tension. Walter stood beside her, silently observing. He saw Howard's hand twitch as Evelyn pulled the old Polaroid from her purse. The photo of three boys in green plaid overalls gleamed in the daylight. At the frame's edge, the deep red Cadillac peeked out. Evelyn held the photo closer. She didn't say much, only asked directly, "Was this his car?" Howard stared at the photo, lips pursed. Time seemed to freeze. The fair's noise faded, leaving only heavy silence. Finally, he looked up, forcing a smile, saying it might be someone else's car. But Evelyn saw the defensiveness in his eyes. Just then, she caught his voice lower, as he leaned toward a staff member, issuing a quick order. "After the performance, leave immediately. Get Diego here." Evelyn froze. Diego. The name echoed in her mind, merging with Ferdinand's image and the Cadillac painting. Pieces began to form. She turned, scanning the fairgrounds. At that moment, a group of teenagers gathered before a small outdoor stage. They prepared for a step dance performance, drums pounding, feet stomping on wood. Evelyn slipped into the crowd, but as the performance began, she stood paralyzed. Among the teenagers, a tall, lean black youth stepped to the front. His steps were bold, precise, but in a pause, a turn, Evelyn recognized something. Gabriel's Gate, the youngest triplet. She'd seen her son practice those steps, playing to music at home, shoulders swaying, heels rhythmic. A body's habits couldn't lie. Evelyn's eyes blurred. She gripped Walter's hand. He saw it too. Amid the echoing drums, past and present intertwined, the fair continued its clamor, but for Evelyn, everything had changed. Howard was hiding something, and she had seen her son's traces in the crowd, in the pulsing music. Dear audience, are you still with us? Take a moment to relax, maybe grab a glass of water, and keep listening to this gripping story. Please comment the number 1 if you find it captivating. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel. The music stopped. Thunderous applause filled the fairgrounds. Evelyn stood still, clutching Walter's arm. The drums echoed in her chest like a frantic heartbeat. On stage, the teenagers bowed, then dispersed into the crowd. Evelyn tried to follow the youth with the familiar gait, but before she could push through, another movement caught her eye. At the tent's edge, a man appeared, walking quickly, almost urgently. Curly black hair, steady stride, broad shoulders, all made her heart skip. If Ferdinand was Lucas reborn, this man was identical. Walter saw it too. He tilted his head, squinting to ensure he wasn't imagining. The same wide smile, the same wrist twist when talking to Howard. The resemblance was chilling. They quietly wove through the crowd, keeping their distance to avoid notice. The man headed straight to Howard's booth, leaning in for a brief exchange. Howard's demeanor shifted, abandoning a donor conversation, hastily packing documents. Evelyn caught his eyes scanning the crowd, wary and colder than usual. The stranger turned, his face clear in the noon Sunday. Evelyn froze, as if struck in the chest. The face was Ferdinand's. Unmistakable. If not twins, there was only one possibility: triplets. A wave of dizziness hit. Evelyn gripped Walter's hand, whispering what she dared not believe aloud. He stood stunned, eyes fixed on the scene. The pieces aligned. Ferdinand at the farm, this man at the fair, the familiar steps on stage. 3 faces, 3 forms, 3 lives, all bearing traces of their blood. Evelyn swallowed hard, heart racing. For a moment, she wanted to rush forward, to call their names. But reason held her back. The truth was too fragile. A shout could shatter it. She forced herself to stay still, only watching, memorizing every detail. Howard, and the man whom she overheard called Diego, spoke quickly. Their gestures were urgent, eyes scanning around. Then both headed to the parking lot, steps resolute. No one else at the booth noticed. Only Evelyn and Walter silently watched. The fair's crowd remained lively, masking the rising tension. Children's laughter, trumpet blasts from the live music area, the smell of popcorn and barbecue smoke mingled. But for Evelyn, her senses narrowed, focused solely on the 2 men leaving. They slipped through cotton candy vendors, hiding behind a row of tents. From there, they saw Howard and Diego by a small truck, whispering. Evelyn held her breath. Diego looked up, his face angled, and she saw clearly. Thick eyebrows, bright eyes, resolute chin. Not just similar, it was Noah, her second son. Evelyn's eyes blurred with tears. She turned to Walter, seeing tears in his eyes too. But he pressed a finger to his lips, urging silence. This wasn't the moment to break. They needed proof, certainty, the law's protection. Howard checked his watch, patted Diego's shoulder, signaling departure. They quickly packed, leaving the booth to other staff. In a moment, both vanished into the parking lot's flow, leaving unease in Evelyn's heart. She stood frozen. The Texas afternoon's stifling heat pressed into her chest, suffocating. She had seen with her own eyes. No more doubt. Lucas, Noah, Gabriel, they didn't vanish in 1981. They had lived, grown, but under different names, in a different life, shaped by Howard's hands. She wiped her tears, gripping Walter's arm. 30 years of pain ignited into fierce conviction, and that conviction now turned to action. The afternoon light cast a golden glow over the fairgrounds. After Howard and Diego left, Evelyn and Walter stood silently, hearts still racing. They had seen 2 men identical to Ferdinand, and memories of their triplet sons felt reawakened from a long dream. But one remained: Gabriel, the youngest, with rounder eyes, smaller frame, hesitant smile. Evelyn couldn't leave without seeing that figure. She pulled Walter back toward the outdoor stage where the teenagers performed. The crowd had thinned, with only a few people packing props, coiling speaker cords, dismantling signs. Evelyn scanned every face, every passing figure. A group of teenagers lingered, chatting lively by a lemonade stand. Evelyn slowed, her heart tightening as she spotted a young, lean boy with thick, curly hair. He stood slightly apart, eyes fixed on the open field, lost in thought. His posture, shoulders slightly hunched, hands fidgeting, Gabriel's familiar habits from childhood. She wanted to run to him, to call his name, but her throat locked. If he was truly Gabriel, he'd lived 30 years under another name, another story. A call could unravel everything. Walter stood beside her, steady as a rock. He placed a hand on her back, both calming and restraining her from acting rashly. They only watched. The youth spoke with a friend, then quickly left, blending into the crowd. Evelyn and Walter followed, keeping distance, her steps trembling as if on fragile ground. The boy headed to a display booth, where Howard's Haven staff were packing flyers and signs. Evelyn saw the warm looks they gave him, like a cherished member of the farm. An older man patted his shoulder, handed him a toolbox, and they vanished toward the parking lot. Evelyn and Walter stopped, not daring to follow further. Her heart choked. She had seen all three, Lucas, Noah, and Gabriel, now under different names, living different lives. They had stood before her eyes. As dusk stretched, they left the fair, moving like shadows. In the car, Evelyn opened her bag, pulling out her phone. Her hands shook as she dialed the county police. No more waiting. The Cadillac photo, the encounter with Howard, Ferdinand and Diego's appearance, and now Gabriel's figure all wove into an undeniable truth. A detective's voice answered, calm but firm. Evelyn kept her voice steady, recounting everything. The 1,981 disappearance, the Polaroid, the Cadillac, Howard's Haven, and 3 identical men in their mid-30s. She spoke unbroken, as if pausing would turn it all into a delusion. Walter watched his wife silently, his eyes torn but resolute. He knew this step couldn't be delayed. The world had to know the truth. The detective listened, silent for a moment, then urged them not to confront Howard. The police would visit the farm, search, and question. Evelyn nodded, though her heart burned. 30 years of waiting didn't easily pause for a promise. As the call ended, the sky turned deep purple. The fair's neon lights began to glow, music echoing across the fields. Evelyn stared out the car window, eyes wet. She had found her pieces, but they weren't home yet. A thick wall remained, Howard's lies, the lost years, and the fear still weighing on her son's shoulders. Walter started the car. The wheels rolled on the dusty gravel road. Before them, the Texas night unfurled like a deep abyss full of secrets. But this time, they were no longer walking in despair. This time, they had clues, evidence, and a burning belief that the day of reunion was near. Evelyn placed the Cadillac photo on her lap, gently tracing the faces of the 3 children in the image. She whispered to herself, "My boys, Mama's coming. I never gave up. And now, I'll bring you home." The sky was completely dark when Walter's car turned onto the gravel road, leading to Howard's Haven for hope. The moon peeked through gray clouds, its dim light casting over the wide field, making everything hazy, like a veil hiding long-buried secrets. Evelyn sat upright, hands on her thighs, eyes fixed on the road ahead. Beside her, Walter drove slowly, each turn of the wheels matching the beat of his heart. They had called the police, and the police were coming. But the few minutes of waiting felt like a pitch-black chasm, ready to swallow all hope. When they stopped at a discreet turn, police car lights appeared in the distance, red and blue flashes blinking in the night. 3 cars pulled up in a line, stopping a few dozen meters away. A tall officer stepped out, his bulletproof vest glinting in the moonlight, signaling them to stay put. Evelyn recognized his voice from the afternoon radio, Detective Martinez. The air turned tense. The police fanned out, moving like shadows through the grass, each carrying a flashlight and weapon. The hum of insects filled the field, interrupted by the crackle of radios. Evelyn and Walter sat in the car, windows cracked open, feeling each cold gust brush their skin. The farm loomed in the distance, silent wooden houses, dark windows, an unnaturally quiet front yard. But that silence made Evelyn shiver. In the darkness, she could imagine the dormitories where children slept, the barns holding untold stories, and the main house, where Howard might be waiting or preparing to flee. An officer signaled. Martinez quietly ordered the advance. Flashlights snapped on, sweeping every corner of the yard. A dog's bark echoed, shattering the dead stillness. A figure darted across the barn, vanishing behind a row of trees. Evelyn held her breath, eyes wide. Her heart ached as if she'd missed something vital. Walter placed a hand on her shoulder, urging her to stay seated. He knew one wrong move could ruin everything. The police moved deeper, pounding on the main door, their loud commands echoing in the night. No response. A tense beat passed, then the door swung open, light spilling out, blinding. Evelyn leaned toward the car window, straining to see. 3 figures emerged. Howard, his white hair disheveled, face taut. Behind him were Ferdinand and Diego, both visibly rattled. In that moment, the world seemed to stop. Evelyn covered her mouth, tears streaming. She saw them, her grown sons, standing before her, but under different names, under the grip of a man they once trusted. Howard raised his hands, feigning cooperation, but his eyes burned with defiance. He said something Evelyn couldn't hear, only seeing his lips purse, voice sharp. Martinez and the officers surrounded him, issuing curt orders. Ferdinand and Diego looked around, faces confused. They exchanged bewildered glances, like lost children in the dark. Evelyn wanted to scream their real names, Lucas, Noah, but her throat choked. Walter gripped her hand, keeping her still. The air grew thick. The police stepped closer, ordering Howard to back away. He hesitated, eyes flashing with anger. Ferdinand whispered something to Diego. Both wavered, unsure whom to follow. In a fleeting moment, Evelyn realized the horrific truth. 30 years of lies had turned her sons into strangers. They no longer knew their real parents, only the man who held them captive. She pressed a hand to her chest, tears falling freely. Across the yard, Howard turned toward the main house, shouting a short, urgent name, Marco. Evelyn froze. The name struck like lightning in the night. Marco. The third. Gabriel. The house remained dark, no one emerging. But Evelyn knew her youngest son was somewhere in that farm. And tonight, every truth would come to light. Shouts rang out as police flooded the yard. Flashlight beams swept across wooden walls, gravel ground, and dark windows. Howard was pushed forward, hands still raised, eyes glinting with subtle defiance. Ferdinand and Diego stood beside him, confused, like lost children, looking around, unsure of what was happening. Evelyn watched from the car, breathless. Her heart pounded, chest heavy as if crushed by a boulder. She saw Howard's lips move, his voice sharp, and then the name rang out again, clearer in the silent yard. Marco. In that moment, time froze. Evelyn turned to Walter, tears streaming. Marco, the false name, but to her, it was Gabriel. Her youngest son was here. The police split into groups. 2 held Howard. Others entered the main house. Boots thudded on wooden floors. Doors creaked. Dogs barked from behind. Evelyn clutched the old photo, as if clinging to a fragile thread, linking past and present. Heavy minutes passed. Then, from the house, flashlight beams converged at the staircase. An officer emerged, followed by a young figure, smaller than Ferdinand and Diego. Thick curly hair, face shadowed in the light, eyes wide, confused. Evelyn knew instantly. That gait, those slightly hunched shoulders, that hesitant look, though grown, in that moment, she saw Gabriel in every feature. Her youngest son, torn away by 30 years, stood before her. Tears spilled. Evelyn pressed her hand to the car window, as if to touch him. Walter bowed his head, shoulders trembling, hiding his emotions. They had found all 3. Gabriel or Marco stood dazed under the flashlights, turning to look at Howard. Howard yanked against the police, shouting something. His voice echoed across the yard, angry, desperate, like a man clinging to control. Ferdinand and Diego froze, eyes darting from Howard to Gabriel, then to the police. Their whole lives, Howard was their only truth. Now, that world was crumbling. An officer gently guided Gabriel away, a hand on his shoulder, calming him. Evelyn opened the car door instinctively, stepping out, despite Walter's soft call. Her legs trembled but moved forward. She walked toward the light, toward the sun she'd waited for over 3 decades. The police stopped her, but Martinez appeared, recognizing her. He nodded, granting permission. Evelyn continued. In that moment, the farmyard shrank to just 2, a mother and her lost son. Gabriel turned, his eyes meeting Evelyn's. For a split second, she saw doubt, fear, and a strange spark as if a buried memory flickered. She softly called his real name, Gabriel. Her voice broke, barely a whisper in the wind. He froze. His eyes blinked rapidly, as if reacting to a familiar sound. Howard shouted behind, trying to drown it out, but the police pulled him back. Evelyn didn't look away from Gabriel. She called again, stronger, a cry from the depths of her heart. Gabriel trembled. He didn't approach, but his steps halted. His lips parted, wordless. The layers of Howard's lies, built over 30 years, were cracking under one word, his true name. Evelyn reached out, tears streaming. In the dim light, her hand was a bridge across a chasm. One side lies, the other truth. Gabriel hadn't crossed, but in his eyes, Evelyn saw what she never lost, the unbreakable bond of blood. The space fell silent. Then an officer led Gabriel away, separating him from Howard and the crowd. Evelyn collapsed into Walter's shoulder, sobbing. She had seen her youngest son, not yet embraced, not yet hearing mama, but she knew the fight to reclaim her sons had truly begun. The Texas night deepened, cloaking the farm in dark blue. Flashing police lights glinted off weathered wood, reflecting on the farm's faded paint. The air was heavy, as if the land were besieged by ghosts. Howard was pushed into a patrol car, the iron door slamming shut with a dry clank. He still turned, looking at the three young men, his eyes screaming to hold control one last time. His lips moved, but the thick glass blocked his voice. The police drove off, leaving a cloud of dust. In a cleared barn, 3 plastic chairs sat side by side. Ferdinand, Diego, and Gabriel sat there, faces tense, eyes darting. They had never sat like this apart from Howard, without his familiar grip that both sheltered and bound them. All 3 looked like grown men thrust back into being lost children. Evelyn stood behind a one-way glass, hands clutching the metal edge. Walter beside her, hand on her shoulder, both gazing at their sons through the glass like a dream. Evelyn's heart ached. Those men bore adult frames, but their eyes held the bewilderment of the 6-year-old boys from long ago. Inside, Detective Martinez sat across from them. He gently placed 3 water bottles on the table, his voice calm, unpressuring. He didn't question immediately, letting silence stretch, giving space for pent-up thoughts. Diego reached for a bottle first, opening it, fingers trembling. Ferdinand followed, glancing at him. Gabriel sat still, eyes fixed on the door, as if expecting Howard to appear. Finally, Martinez spoke. He didn't mention Howard first, asking instead about their childhood, their earliest memories. Ferdinand spoke slowly, each word drawn from a deep place. He recalled a cramped room, Howard carrying him out, saying his parents had abandoned him. Diego interjected, saying Howard told them they were orphans, saved from poverty and sin. Gabriel stayed silent, hands gripping his knees, nails digging into skin. Martinez nodded, then gently placed the old photo on the table. The image of 3 boys in green plaid overalls, arms around each other, smiling brightly. The air shifted instantly. Ferdinand leaned down, eyes drawn to the image. Diego touched the photo's edge, as if touching a sleeping memory. Gabriel looked up, eyes red, breathing fast. Silence grew stifling. Ferdinand whispered, That's us." His voice trembled, uncertain but full of pain. Diego stared, then nodded slowly. Gabriel shook his head, resisting, but his lips moved wordlessly. Martinez didn't press, leaving the photo there. He spoke of the 12th of June, 1981, of 3 children vanishing from a small town. He told of their parents, searching for 3 decades. Evelyn listened, tears falling, hands shaking as she watched her sons face the truth. Ferdinand leaned back, eyes closed, a tear rolling down. Diego gripped his hand, eyes glistening, as if both saw a shared memory, a small house, a birthday party, laughter of 3 identical boys. Gabriel, still resisting, couldn't hide his eyes beginning to shine as Evelyn, outside, pressed her hand to the glass, silently calling his name. Martinez closed the file, his voice firm but gentle. Howard wasn't your father. He took 30 years of your lives. But the truth is here, and your parents are still waiting. Ferdinand sobbed, a childlike cry choked back. Diego hugged his shoulder, both trembling as memories flooded. Gabriel stayed silent, but his shoulders shook, hands loosening, eyes glancing at the glass. Beyond it, Evelyn pressed her forehead to the glass, whispering, "My boys." In that moment, an invisible wall cracked, not fully collapsed, but enough for truth's light to seep through. And from there, everything was about to change. The interrogation room door opened slowly, its hinges creaking, heightening the suspense of each second. Evelyn stood, heart pounding, hands clasped, icy cold. Walter gripped her shoulder, giving strength, but his own breath trembled. An officer stepped out, nodding. "You can go in," he said briefly, his low voice like a choir backing a pivotal moment. Evelyn crossed the threshold, her feet barely touching the ground. Everything blurred, leaving only the three figures ahead. Grown men, but achingly familiar. Ferdinand looked up first. His red eyes hesitated, then locked onto her, and he stood abruptly. Diego followed, while Gabriel remained seated, shoulders rigid, eyes wavering between his mother and the void. Evelyn stopped in the room's center, eyes brimming. No words came, only a thick silence holding 30 years of waiting. She raised her hand, a small, trembling gesture, but enough for Ferdinand to step forward. He moved slowly, as if fearing the dream would vanish if he went too fast. At one step away, Evelyn opened her arms. Ferdinand fell into them, his choked sobs ringing, head buried in her shoulder. Diego followed, arms wrapping tightly around his mother, breath ragged. In her embrace, the two grown men became the boys of old children who once nestled in her lap, now trembling as their lost childhood returned. Evelyn pressed her face into their hair, whispering tearful calls. Walter stood beside, hand covering his mouth, eyes wet. Only Gabriel remained. He sat, eyes torn, hands clenched. The truth knocked at his mind, but 30 years of lies didn't fade easily. He saw Howard as a savior, a pillar, while the woman before him, his real mother, was only mentioned hours ago. His heart split in two. Evelyn looked up, meeting his eyes. She didn't approach, giving him the choice. Tears rolled. She whispered, "Gabriel." Her voice trembled, but in it was a familiar echo from his earliest days. Diego turned, gently touching his youngest brother's shoulder. "Look," his eyes said. Ferdinand looked too, eyes full. Gabriel shook, lips moving. He glanced at the old photo on the table, then at Evelyn's face worn by time but brimming with maternal love. Finally, as if a wall crumbled, Gabriel stood. Slowly, step by step, he approached. Evelyn reached out, not pushing, only opening her arms. When Gabriel stepped into that space, when his body touched hers, when his sobs broke free, the room seemed to explode. Walter joined, his broad arms encircling Evelyn and their three sons. 5 bodies clung together, sobbing in a moment where time stood still. No barn, no police, no painful past, only a family reunited. Evelyn touched Gabriel's face, trembling fingers tracing grown features still holding traces of her youngest boy. "I never stopped looking for you," she whispered, tears streaming. Gabriel closed his eyes, sinking into her, letting memories flood like a tide. In that embrace, 30 years of loss couldn't be erased, but a blood bond was restored. No doubt remained, this was their family, a truth no lie could break. In another police station room, the air was thick, the cramped space, gray walls, and fluorescent light drained all life. Howard sat, hands on the cold metal table, wrists cuffed. He stared at a small scratch on the surface, as if controlling a storm raging in his mind. Detective Martinez sat across, placing a thick file on the table. The dry thud sounded like a warning bell. He opened it, revealing photos. The triplets in green plaid overalls, the red Cadillac peeking at the frame's edge, and forged documents from Howard's office. Howard stayed silent, lips tight. Martinez didn't rush, letting time weigh. Only when the wall clock ticked steadily did he speak. You lived a life of lies. But tonight, the truth must come out. Howard looked up, old eyes flashing defiance. I saved them, he said slowly, voice hoarse but firm. None of you understand. They'd have been abandoned. I gave them a home, a better life. Martinez didn't respond immediately. He placed another photo on the table. Ferdinand, Diego, and Gabriel in the other interrogation room, eyes heavy, shoulders trembling. You call that saving? His voice low, deliberate. You stole their childhood, their family, their identity. You ripped them from their real parents and fed them a lie. Howard frowned, but his eyes didn't waver. I lost everything, he burst out, voice suddenly sharp. My wife, my twin sons. That world took everything from me. I wouldn't let it take more. I saw those 3 boys bright, innocent, and I knew they were mine. They were my chance to start over. He paused, breathing heavily, cuffed hands trembling. For a moment, Howard's face wasn't that of a respected teacher or charitable benefactor. It became the face of an obsessed, broken man, warped by loss and selfishness. Martinez stared, unmoved. And to do that, you destroyed another family. You used your pain to justify a crime. And Howard laughed, a dry laugh echoing in the room. That family? They left their kids in the yard, unwatched. They didn't deserve them. I made them men. Without me, they'd be nothing. The laugh chilled. Martinez pushed the final photo forward, the Cadillac found in the farm's garage, its red paint faded by years. This car betrayed you, he said slowly. It was in the photo the day the boys vanished. It's in your garage, 30 years later. No more denials. Howard stared at the photo, eyes flaring, then darkening. A moment of silence, then he whispered, they were happier with me. You'll never understand. Martinez closed the file, voice firm. No, Howard. They weren't happy. They were imprisoned in your lies. But tonight, they've found their real parents. Howard sat, face crumpling, wrinkles deepening, like a statue about to crack. He said no more, but his eyes held a twisted defiance, a man who believed himself a savior, when he was only a thief of 30 years from an innocent family. Outside, Evelyn held her sons tightly. Here, Howard sat alone in the cold room, surrounded not just by concrete walls, but by the lies he built now collapsed, weighing on his aged, slumped shoulders in the dark. The interrogation room door opened again. Ferdinand, Diego, and Gabriel entered, escorted by 2 officers. They were no longer tightly guarded, but their steps were heavy, as if treading on layered memories. Evelyn and Walter stood behind the glass, hands clasped, hearts both hopeful and anxious. Howard sat, hands cuffed, looking up as the 3 entered. For a moment, he wasn't a captured criminal, but the familiar figure, the man who taught them work, told bedtime stories, held their hands through long years. His face softened, a faint smile appearing. My boys. The words halted all 3. My boys had been the anchor binding them for 3 decades. Now, it cut like a knife, slicing their fragile trust. Ferdinand bowed his head, shoulders tense. Diego stared at him, eyes mixing anger and pain. Gabriel trembled, eyes wavering between Howard and the void. Martinez sat quietly in the corner, not intervening. This was a moment only they and Howard could face. Howard leaned forward, voice low, persuasive. Everything I did was to protect you. The world out there is cruel. Your parents abandoned you, but I gave you a family. Diego laughed dryly, humorless. Family? He pointed to a thin scar on his wrist, a mark from a bamboo switch. You call that family? Making us kneel for hours, beating us for disobedience. You think that's love? Howard didn't flinch, but his lips tightened. He didn't deny, only sighed, as if he were the misunderstood victim. Discipline was necessary. You wouldn't be strong without hardship. Ferdinand looked up, eyes red. Strong or broken? You took our childhood. You took our real home. You made us believe we were orphans, that our parents were in jail. You lied to us for 30 years, Howard. His voice choked at the end, like a bleeding wound. Gabriel hadn't spoken. He stared at Howard, then glanced at the glass where Evelyn stood. Beyond it, his mother pressed her hand to the glass, eyes wet, watching every move. Gabriel swallowed, his hoarse voice finally rising. So, what are our real names? Howard turned, eyes flashing fiercely. The names I gave you are real. Ferdinand, Diego, Marco. That's who you are. He stressed each word, as if imposing truth one last time. Don't listen to them. They want to take you from me. Gabriel stepped back, face paling. He whispered, almost to himself, but why? Why in the photo do we have the same smile, and she knows my name? Gabriel. The words faded, but Evelyn beyond the glass sobbed, hands trembling on the metal edge. Diego stepped forward, voice loud, no longer shaking. We don't belong to you. We're not tools to replace your lost family. We're Lucas, Noah, Gabriel, and they are our real parents. Howard slammed his hand on the table, the metal clanging. No, you're mine. No one loved you more than I did. I sacrificed my life to raise you. His face twisted, wrinkles deepening like cracks, revealing his warped core. Ferdinand turned away, refusing to look. Diego clenched his fists, holding back. Gabriel, after a long, torn moment, fully turned to the glass. He looked at Evelyn, at Walter, and in his eyes was acknowledgement, fragile, but real. Howard saw it. He surged up, but the cuffs yanked him back. His voice broke into a desperate wail. Don't leave me. You belong to me. The police restrained him, pressing him to the chair. The room briefly erupted, then fell silent. Only the young men's ragged breaths and the weight of undeniable truth remained. Outside, Evelyn leaned against the glass, tears streaming. She whispered, almost praying, "My boys, come back." The night stretched endlessly. In the police station hallway, yellow light cast on cold tiles. Evelyn sat, clutching a soaked tissue. Walter's hand rested on her shoulder, silently sharing her heart's burden. They waited again, but this time different. Not 30 years, but mere minutes, yet time felt like a lifetime. Inside the interrogation room, the three young men sat, faces damp with sweat and tears. Ferdinand breathed heavily, hands trembling on the table. Diego stared into space, as if unraveling knots in his mind. Gabriel was different. He leaned back, hands gripping the chair's edge, body pulled in opposing directions. Howard was pushed to the corner, eyes never leaving Gabriel. Gone was the teacher's dignity or benefactor's kindness. Instead, an obsessive, desperate gaze, like a man losing his last hold. The air was thick, only rapid breaths audible. Then, suddenly, Gabriel stood. The room fell silent. He turned to Howard, voice hoarse but clear. "You're not my father." Howard jolted, eyes wide, face shattering like glass on tile. He shook his head, mouth stammering, wordless. The truth he denied for 30 years was finally torn apart by his youngest son. Gabriel turned to his brothers. Ferdinand stood instantly, embracing him tightly, trembling but resolute. Diego joined, completing the embrace. 3 bodies clung together, and in that moment, no words were needed. They acknowledged. They were Lucas, Noah, and Gabriel, not Ferdinand, Diego, or Marco, as Howard imposed. Outside, Evelyn sobbed. She pressed both hands to the glass, whispering repeatedly, "My boys." Walter bowed his head, tears falling, but a faint smile appeared, like dawn after a long storm. Howard screamed, a piercing wail, pinned to the chair by officers. He thrashed like a cornered beast, eyes blazing, voice breaking in despair. "They're mine. I raised them. I gave them everything. You can't take them from me." But the 3 didn't look back. They held each other, letting real memories return. A small Texas house, A mother's smile, a father's rough hands. Images, sounds, warmth slowly filled the void Howard had occupied for 30 years. Martinez signaled. The police dragged Howard out. The clank of iron chains echoed down the hall. His steps were heavy, not from age, but from a lifetime of lies collapsing. The steel door slammed, leaving a deep silence in the room. Gabriel took a deep breath, turning to the glass. He walked slowly, Ferdinand and Diego beside him. As their faces neared, Evelyn could bear it no longer. She rushed to the door, demanding entry. An officer nodded, unlocking it. When the door swung open, Evelyn ran in, arms wide. The three young men stepped forward, and all four bodies locked in a tearful embrace. Walter joined, and for the first time in 30 years, the family stood whole, erupting in fierce joy. No words, only tears, sobs, and the breath of hearts reunited. A stolen maternal bond was restored, a broken family mended. Outside the window, dawn began to break, pale light tinting the Texas sky. And in that light, a new chapter opened of healing, truth, and love that never died. 30 years. A lifetime stolen, a family in darkness, and 3 children raised in a web of lies. But the truth finally found its way, even after decades. Evelyn and Walter held their sons, Lucas, Noah, and Gabriel in trembling but steadfast arms. Tears couldn't erase the lost years, but they washed away pain, opening a new beginning. The deep wound wouldn't heal in one night, but the moment the family stood together under the Texas dawn proved love was stronger than any lie. Howard would face justice and spend his remaining days behind bars. But the Marlow family had reclaimed what mattered most, truth and the chance to heal. Time lost couldn't be regained, but maternal and paternal love never died. For us listening to this story, it's a reminder. Sometimes darkness can swallow a lifetime, but light finds a way. A mother's love, a father's persistence, and truth will ultimately prevail. If you believe this story deserves to continue, leave a comment below. Share your thoughts, and if you want to witness the Marlow family's healing journey, join me in awaiting the next part, because this isn't just an end, it's the start of a new chapter.